I never thought that at 84 years old, I would still be telling love stories. Especially not one like this. My name is Margaret Evans, and if you had told me 10 years ago that I would be walking down the aisle again in a white gown, my blonde curls pinned neatly behind my veil, I would have laughed. I had already lived a full life. Raised children, buried my husband, survived breast cancer, and even retired from my teaching career in Maine. I believed romance was a closed chapter. But life has a funny way of surprising us when we least expect it. It started when I met Daniel. He was a tall, polite man in his late 70s, with silver hair that glistened under the church lights the first day he introduced himself to me. His voice carried warmth, and his hands, though veined and worn with age, were gentle when they reached for mine. He said he was a widower too, that he knew the pain of losing someone you had built your life with. That shared grief brought us together like magnets. Daniel made me feel like a young woman again. He sent me handwritten letters, slipped roses under my front door, and always insisted on walking me home after church service. He called me his angel, and sometimes I caught him looking at me like I was the last person on earth worth loving. I fell harder than I thought my old heart could. But there was something about him that was unusual even then. He would speak often about his faith and purity. He told me more than once that he was a virgin. At first I thought he was joking, but he would smile with such conviction, such boyish pride, that I believed him. Imagine, a man nearly 80 who claimed he had never been with a woman. My friends at church whispered about it, and some even laughed, but I thought it was noble, rare, and somehow endearing. And then came the wedding. That morning I stood before the mirror, fastening the delicate lace of my gown, my wrinkled hands trembling. I never thought I'd wear white again, but Daniel insisted. He said I deserved to feel like a bride, pure and cherished. My granddaughter, Emily, helped apply a soft shade of lipstick and told me I looked beautiful. For a moment I believed her. For a moment I believed everything was finally falling into place. The ceremony was small but sweet, held in the same church where we met. The choir sang softly as Daniel and I exchanged vows. He looked into my eyes with so much devotion that tears slipped down my cheeks. He said he would cherish me until his last breath, and I believed him with every fiber of my being. After decades of loneliness, I finally felt chosen again. But weddings are just beginnings, aren't they? It's what happens after that either cements a bond or shatters it. Later that evening, after the laughter, after the cake, and after the dancing under dim fairy lights, Daniel carried me over the threshold of his home. My heart fluttered like I was 20 again. I was nervous, shy even, but also excited. This was our wedding night. Our first night as husband and wife. I excused myself, slipped into the bathroom, and when I returned, the room was dimly lit with candles. Daniel was waiting, his shirt off, his body frilier than I imagined, but still strong in presence. He reached for me and I for him. And that's when it happened. In that moment, as I drew closer, I discovered something that froze the breath in my lungs. My hand, trembling, reached out, and my eyes widened at what I saw. Something that should have been impossible, something that shattered every illusion I had built about him. Daniel, my husband, the man who swore he was a virgin, the man who promised me purity, had both male and female organs. I pulled back instantly, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. My mind raced in confusion, shame, and disbelief. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. He looked at me, his face pale, his lips quivering as though he had been hiding this secret for a lifetime. "Margaret, please, let me explain." But I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The world around me spun until all I could hear was the echo of my own heartbeat and the cruel laughter of fate. And that night, on what should have been the most tender evening of my life, I made a decision that would shock not just Daniel but everyone around us. By morning, I was already on my way to the courthouse, filed for divorce. But what happened after that was only the beginning of a storm I never saw coming. By the time the courthouse doors slid open that morning, my hands were shaking so badly I had to hold my tote bag with both arms like it was a baby I didn't want to drop. The clerk behind the glass looked up with that tired, kind look you only see at government offices, then glanced at the form I had filled out in block letters. Petition for dissolution, it read. I stood there in my cream cardigan and low-heeled shoes, my blonde curls tucked under a wool beret, and wondered how many brides had come here the very next day. Mrs. Evans, the clerk said gently, are you sure you want to file this today? No question had ever felt heavier. I thought of last night, the candles, the surprise, the way the room spun, and of Daniel's face. His mouth forming the word please like a prayer he had used his whole life. I wasn't angry then, I was stunned. Shock is loud and quiet at the same time. It turns every memory into a broken plate you're scared to touch. I'm sure, I said, even though a part of me wasn't sure at all. I need to reclaim my breath. The clerk nodded, stamped the paper, and slid a copy back to me. The sound of the stamp was final and too loud. People in the waiting area turned to look. One woman smiled in sympathy. A man reading a hunting magazine didn't look up. The door side closed behind me, and the cold Maine air hit my face like a bracing hand. My phone had been buzzing the whole time. 12 missed calls from Daniel. 3 from my granddaughter, Emily. 1 from my son, who never calls unless something is wrong with his car or his taxes. I stared at the little glowing numbers and felt 84 years old in my bones. I didn't answer anyone. Not yet. I walked the 3 blocks to Beacon Diner, ordered a black coffee I didn't want, and watched the steam drift up as if it knew where it was going. The waitress, a redhead who always called me Hon, set down a plate of toast I hadn't ordered. On the house, she said. You look like you could use it. Bad night, I whispered. She nodded like she'd seen worse. Coffee helps you decide if you want to cry or not. I didn't cry. I sat there and let the coffee warm my hands until the trembling stopped, and I tried to make sense of everything. Here is what I know now and did not understand last night. Being intersex is not a failing. It is not a sin. It is a part of some people, just like my scar from breast surgery is a part of me. It is not shameful. But that is different from secrecy in a marriage. Secrets rot the floorboards under your feet until you fall through. Daniel's secret wasn't what he was. It was what he didn't tell me. I sipped the coffee and watched the light on Main Street change from pale silver to a braver, whiter morning. The bakery opened. School kids lifted hoods against the wind. A golden retriever dragged his owner toward the park. The everydayness of it made last night feel even stranger, like I had stepped through a trapdoor and landed back in the same room but nothing lined up anymore. My phone buzzed again. Emily answered this time. Hi, baby. Grandma, are you okay? She sounded breathless, whispering like she'd ducked into a hallway at her nursing classes. I saw the church group chat. People are talking. Daniel changed his relationship status to married, then back to nothing. Aunt Claire said she saw you at the courthouse. Please tell me you're safe. I'm safe, I said. I didn't know what else to say. Do you want me to come get you? I can borrow Dad's truck. Finish your classes. I'll be fine. There was a pause. Do you want to talk about it? Not yet, I said, because if I started, I might tell her too much and it wasn't my secret to give away. I'll call you this evening. After we hung up, I paid for the coffee, left a bigger tip than I should have, and stepped outside. I tried to walk slowly like my doctor tells me to do after my knees ache. But my mind was racing ahead of me, back to when I first met Daniel and all the tiny moments that didn't make sense until now. He never liked doctor talk. Once, at a potluck, I was telling a story about the time the hospital mixed up my appointment and sent me to the pediatric wing, and instead of laughing, he stiffened like a gust of cold air hit him. He avoided any conversation about bodies, about intimacy, about the past. Thought he was shy. I thought he was a gentleman. When I said, halfway joking, "We'll have to take things slow, you virgin," he blushed and squeezed my hand. "I've waited my whole life," he said with a small smile. I took his words like a gift. Now I see they were also a fence he built to protect the part of him he was afraid to show. Another memory. 3 months ago, I found a folded letter on his kitchen counter addressed to D. Harrington, confidential. I only saw it because it slid under a cookbook when I was making meatloaf for him. The logo on the envelope was a Boston Medical Center. I put it back exactly where I found it. I told myself we are not married yet. People are allowed their private mail. I made the meatloaf and carried it to the table and told him it was a little dry because I forgot the ketchup in the mix. And he said it was perfect and kissed my forehead and cleared the plates. Sometimes love is a warm plate of something imperfect. Sometimes love is pretending you didn't see a letter. I passed St. Mark's Church on my way home. The door was propped open, and I could hear Pastor Rick's low voice practicing something at the altar. An older couple I recognized from the front pew stood outside, talking in that tight way people use when they want to gossip but also want to seem polite. "Morning," I said. They both jumped and then tried to look casual. "Morning, Margaret," the woman said. "We missed you at the Wednesday Bible Circle." "I was busy," I said. They both nodded too much. "These chilly days," the man said. "Hard on the joints. Hard on the heart," I murmured and kept walking. At home, I folded my wedding dress over the back of a chair because I couldn't bring myself to put it in the closet. The lace looked like something that belonged to another person. My living room smelled like vanilla from the candle I forgot to blow out last night when I ran out. My cat, Penny, rubbed against my ankles and meowed, indignant that her life was not following the proper schedule of naps, treats, and sunbeams. "Sorry, Penny," I said. "Your grandma's a mess." Around noon, Daniel texted, Please meet me. Just for coffee. Public place. I owe you the truth. I should have told you before. I was afraid. I stared at the screen a long time. I could have blocked him. I could have replied with a lawyer's number. Instead I typed, Beacon Diner. 2 p.m. 15 minutes. The hours between noon and 2 felt like a long hallway I had to walk barefoot. I made tea and didn't drink it. I sat down and stood up and sat down again. I found my old journal and opened to a blank page and wrote, "Truth and kindness are cousins. Sometimes they argue." I underlined it twice. When I reached the diner, Daniel was already there, sitting in a booth with his hands folded like a boy after detention. He looked small. He looked older than yesterday. His silver hair, always neat, had a wild wing to it, like wind had run its fingers through. He stood when he saw me. "Margaret." I slid into the opposite bench and kept my coat on. "You have 15 minutes. He swallowed, then nodded. His throat worked like he had to force the words up from a place they had been hiding for 79 years. "I was born different," he said quietly. "My mother told me when I was 10, after too many doctor visits with words I didn't understand. They did things to me as a baby. Surgeries. My father said we don't talk about it. Ever. I learned to keep it inside like a locked cupboard. When Martha, my wife..." He stopped, closed his eyes. "When Martha and I married, we were companions. She was ill for many years. We never had that part. Not really. When she died, I told myself I was a virgin because it was easier than telling myself I was a man who never knew how to be one the way people expect. Maybe that was foolish. Maybe it was a shield. I thought faith would make me whole, or at least quiet. Then I met you. I wish you had told me," I said. My voice came out softer than I felt. "Not because what you are is wrong. Because secrets take the air out of a room." "I know," he whispered. "I tried last night. I was going to say it before." He made a helpless gesture. "But I waited too long, and then it was our wedding night, and you were beautiful and brave, and I panicked. Sorry." "I know sorry is a small word." The waitress arrived and poured water. Neither of us reached for it. Daniel stared at the condensation sliding down the glass like he was studying rain on a window. Took a breath. "I filed this morning." "I know." He flinched like the words themselves stung. "The clerk is my neighbor's niece. She texted me to say she saw you. I didn't ask her to. Small town sins. Annulment might be cleaner," I said, more to myself than to him. "We didn't, you know. Might be kinder too. Fewer papers. Less noise." His eyes filled. "Whatever you choose I will accept. I will not fight you. I only ask. Please do not let them talk about me like I am a ghost story. Please protect my dignity the way I would protect yours. The request knotted something in my chest. I won't tell anyone your medical history. That is yours to hold. He nodded, relief and grief braided together in his shoulders. Thank you. We sat in a quiet that wasn't comfortable but wasn't cruel either. The waitress left the check. Daniel reached for it. I placed my hand over his. For a second, our old tenderness was there, thin as ice. Take care of yourself, I said. You too, he whispered. Outside, the wind had teeth. I pulled my scarf up and started toward home, thinking maybe I could sleep for a century. But Pastor Rick's SUV was parked by the church with its hazard lights on, and before I could cross the street, he waved me over. Margaret, he called, stepping out. His coat flapped in the wind. Can we talk? I almost kept walking. I didn't have room for questions. But I respected the man. He had sat with me during chemo and read Psalms when I was too sick to read for myself. Stop. There are rumors, he said carefully. About last night. People are cruel when they don't understand. I don't need details. I only need to know if you want me to say anything from the pulpit on Sunday about kindness and privacy and the right way to carry each other. I'd like that, I said. My voice shook. Please focus on kindness. Not on me. Not on him. On kindness. He nodded, thoughtful. I can do that. Then, as if he wasn't sure if he should add it, he said, Daniel asked if he could speak to the congregation. He said he wants to tell the truth himself. My stomach clenched. When? Tonight. The fellowship hall. 6 o'clock. Just the church family. He asked me to invite you. The idea made my knees soft. A room full of people, their faces lifting like flowers toward the sun of a story. My story, his story, our broken little story. I didn't know if I could bear it. But I also knew this. When people tell their own truth, they take back their name from the whispers. I'll come, I heard myself say. On one condition. Name it. No one turns it into a trial. No questions like spears. Just listening. Pastor Rick pressed his lips together, then nodded. I'll hold that line. When I got home, there was a note stuck under my door. In careful block letters. If you hurt him, we'll hurt you. No signature. No return address. Just a threat as ugly as mud on a white dress. I felt my face go cold, then hot. Penny arched her back at the paper like it hissed. I burned the note over the sink. Watched it curl in on itself like a spider and turn to safe black nothing. Then I called Emily. Can you pick me up at 5:30? Yes. There's a meeting at church. I want you there, but if you come, you have to be my quiet witness, not my soldier. I can do quiet, she said. I'll bring tissues and peppermint gum. At 5:28, headlights swept across my porch. Emily hopped out, cheeks pink from the cold. She looked so much like her mother at that age that my heart did that ache smile it does when time shows you a circle. You ready? She asked. No, I said. But I'm going anyway. The fellowship hall smelled like coffee, folding chairs and old hymnals, the cozy perfume of small-town gatherings. About 30 people had come, all familiar faces from casseroles and car washes and Christmas pageants. Some avoided my eyes. Some squeezed my hand. The air was loud with whispers that stopped and started like wind through birch leaves. Daniel stood at the front of the room next to Pastor Rick. He wore his navy blazer and the tie with tiny red anchors Emily had picked for him at the thrift store. His hands were shaking so badly I could see it from the back row. Pastor Rick raised his palms. Thank you all for coming on short notice, he said. We are here tonight not to pry, not to judge, but to listen. Our brother Daniel asked to speak. I'm here to make sure we keep our hearts soft. He stepped aside. Daniel moved to the center, took a breath and looked at me. Not at the crowd. Me. The room seemed to lean in. My name is Daniel Harrington, he said, voice thin but steady. I am a man of faith. I am also a man who has been afraid of telling the truth about my body for 79 years. I married a woman yesterday who deserved that truth before she said, I do. Failed her. Tonight, I will tell you what I should have told her sooner. Not because you deserve my private details, but because rumors already took my story and twisted it. I am here to straighten what I can. The door at the back of the hall opened. A reporter from the local paper slipped in, camera hanging from his neck. 2 more people followed, then a third with a phone held high. Someone must have posted about the meeting. The air changed. Something sharp and hungry slid into it. Pastor Rick's jaw tightened. "This is a private church gathering," he said, moving toward them. "We won't allow recording." The reporter shrugged. "Public interest, Pastor. Folks want answers." I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "If you want answers," I said, my voice louder than I expected, "you'll get kindness first or you'll get nothing." My heart thudded. My knees trembled. I could feel Emily's hand hover near my elbow like a safety net. Before anyone could respond, another person stepped in behind the reporters, a woman with short gray hair and tired eyes, clutching a manila folder to her chest. She looked like trouble and mercy at the same time. "Daniel," she called, voice breaking. "Danny, it's me." He turned. I watched color drain from his face. "Ruth," he whispered. "What are you doing here?" The room buzzed like a hive now, everyone jostling for a look. Pastor Rick tried to calm them, but the words bounced off the walls like rubber balls. The gray-haired woman took a step forward. "I'm sorry to come like this," she said, tears shining. "But you said tonight you'd tell the truth. And there's a truth I've been carrying alone for 50 years. She lifted the folder. "It's about the night you and I were at St. Joseph's. It's about what they did. And it's about the baby." The word baby fell into the room like a stone into a still lake. Everything rippled outward at once. I reached for the back of my chair to steady myself. Daniel staggered, catching himself on the podium. He looked like someone who had run from a storm his whole life and had finally turned to see it right behind him. "Ruth," he said, voice shredding. "Don't." But it was too late. She had opened the folder, and papers were slipping out like snow. "Stop," Pastor Rick said, hands up. "No names. No documents. We can't." Ruth's eyes found mine, and what I saw there wasn't malice. It was desperate, aching relief. "Margaret," she said, "you need to hear this too." The reporters surged forward, cameras rising. The hall lights flickered once, twice, as if the building itself were holding its breath. And before anyone could move, before anyone could collect the falling pages or turn off a camera or say a prayer, Ruth said the 7 words that split the room open. "Danny, tell them about our child, alive." The room exploded. Gasping, shouts, footsteps, the scrape of chairs, Pastor Rick's voice trying to be louder than panic and failing. Daniel's face crumpled like paper in the rain. Emily gripped my arm so hard it would leave a bruise. My heart pounded against my ribs like it wanted out. Life. My world, already tilted, began to spin again. A terrible carousel I couldn't step off. And all I could think, over the clamor and the flashing phones and the pounding in my ears, was a single thought that felt like a door unlocking and swinging wide. There is more I don't know. And it's coming straight at me. The hall erupted like someone had thrown a match into dry straw. Voices overlapped. Questions hissed and shouted all at once. "What baby? Is this true? Alive? At his age?" Chairs scraped across the linoleum floor as people twisted in their seats, craning their necks toward Daniel and the woman named Ruth. Someone dropped a hymnal, and the thud echoed over the chaos like a gavel. I stood frozen. My granddaughter Emily had her hand wrapped so tightly around my arm I could feel the blood pulsing beneath her grip. My body swayed, but my eyes never left Daniel. His face was pale, his lips parted, eyes darting from Ruth to the crowd, then back to me, as if I could rescue him. But how could I rescue a man who had already drowned me in secrets? Pastor Rick clapped his hands sharply. "Everyone, quiet." His voice cracked with authority. Slowly, the room simmered down, though whispers still fizzled in the air like static electricity. Ruth took another shaky step forward, clutching the manila folder as if it were her lifeline. They told us the baby didn't survive, she said, her voice trembling but clear. St. Joseph's. Back in 1973. But it was a lie. I know because I tracked him. He's alive. The words hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Daniel stumbled against the podium. His hands gripped the wood so tightly his knuckles shone white. Ruth, stop, he whispered hoarsely. Please. Not like this. But she shook her head. Not like this. Danny, I carried that grief for 50 years. I buried an empty grave. I lived with nightmares. And then last month I got the letter. She pulled an envelope from the folder, the paper crinkled, edges worn. She held it high for the room to see. The reporters leaned forward, cameras flashing despite Pastor Rick's protests. Emily muttered under her breath, "This is a circus." I felt my stomach twist into a knot. "Daniel," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I meant to speak to him or myself. He finally lifted his head. His eyes brimmed with something rawer than shame, fear. "I didn't know," he said, his voice breaking. "I swear to God, Margaret, I didn't know." The congregation gasped again. Some crossed themselves. Others exchanged looks, as though deciding whether to pity or condemn him. Ruth dropped the folder on the table. Paper spilled out. Copies of hospital documents, notes scribbled on lined paper, a photograph of a young boy from decades ago with dark eyes and a hesitant smile. My heart jolted as I realized that boy could have been Daniel's mirror. "I got this letter," Ruth said, unfolding the envelope with shaking hands. "From a nurse who worked there. She said she couldn't live with the lie anymore. She said the baby was adopted out, that he grew up in Boston. His name is Jonathan. He's alive." The room went silent. No coughs, no whispers. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Daniel swayed where he stood. Pastor Rick reached for his shoulder, but Daniel pulled away. His lips quivered, and then his voice cracked like glass. "Ruth, I thought we buried him." Tears streamed down his face now. "I thought I've lived 50 years thinking I failed you, that I failed him. Oh God!" He covered his face with his hands and began to sob. I had never seen him cry before. Not once. Not at funerals, not at hospital bedsides. Not when he told me he was a virgin with that proud smile. Now he was crumbling before everyone, and I realized how much of him I never knew. My own breath came shallow. Baby. A hidden child. Another secret layered over the one I had already run from. How many rooms of this house of lies was I expected to live in? Emily leaned closer. "Grandma, do you want to leave? This isn't safe for you." But my legs felt anchored. "No," I said softly. "Not yet. I need to hear it all." Ruth looked around at the faces staring back at her. "I didn't come here to shame him," she said. "I came here because I can't carry this alone anymore. Jonathan deserves to know who his father is. And Daniel," her voice broke, "you deserve to stop hiding." Daniel lowered his hands, his cheeks wet, his eyes hollow. Slowly, shakily he turned toward me. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice a thread. "I swear I didn't know. I never wanted to hurt you. But if you leave now, if you never see me again, please don't leave thinking I was a monster. I'm just a coward. A coward who loved you too late, who told the truth too late." The silence that followed was unbearable. Then a reporter's voice cut through it. "So when will you meet your son, Daniel? Does he know about you?" The question was like a slap. Daniel flinched. Ruth clutched her folder tighter. Pastor Rick shouted at the reporters to leave, but their cameras were already flashing, recording every tremor, every tear. And then the back doors of the fellowship hall creaked open again. A tall man with broad shoulders stepped inside. His face was lined with the kind of weather that comes from life lived hard. His dark hair was streaked with gray, his jaw tense. In his hand, he held a folded piece of paper. The entire hall turned to look. Ruth gasped, covering her mouth. "Jonathan!" The man's eyes swept across the room, then landed on Daniel. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He just walked forward, each step slow and deliberate, until he stood a few feet from the podium. "You don't know me," he said, his voice deep, steady, but roughened by emotion. "But I know who you are. And I think it's time we had a conversation." Daniel's knees buckled. Pastor Rick caught him before he collapsed. The room exploded again. Voices, shouts, prayers, sobs. Emily clutched me tight, whispering, "Oh my God, Grandma. It's real. He's real." And all I could do was stand there, my hands trembling, my chest aching, as my new husband, my not even 24-hour husband, faced the son he never knew existed. The son who had just walked into our lives like a ghost stepping out of the grave. And I had no idea whether he was here for answers or revenge. When Jonathan spoke, the room hushed again, like every sound had been pulled out by a vacuum. His voice wasn't loud, but it had weight, the kind of voice that carried years of silence behind it. "I came here," he said, holding up the folded paper, "because of this." He unfolded it slowly, deliberately. The paper was yellowed at the edges. The ink faded. Even from where I stood, I could tell it was old. Older than me and Daniel, older than this whole mess. "It's a copy of my adoption certificate," Jonathan continued. "I got it 6 weeks ago after years of searching. My adoptive parents passed years ago, and they left me with questions that never had answers. But then a nurse, maybe the same one who wrote to you, Ruth, finally gave me this." He paused, staring down at the paper. His jaw clenched, his voice wavered, but he kept speaking. "It says I was born at St. Joseph's Hospital. Says my birth parents were Daniel Harrington and Ruth Williams. And it says," he looked up now, his eyes burning, "that I was stillborn. That's the lie they wrote down. The lie that stole 50 years from me." The paper trembled in his hand. Ruth sobbed openly now, pressing both hands to her mouth. "Oh, Jonathan," she whispered, as if her voice could bridge decades. Daniel leaned heavily against the podium. His shoulders slumped. His lips moved like he was praying, though no sound came out. And me. I stood there frozen, my chest tightening until I could hardly breathe. I thought last night was the shock of my life, but this revelation, this flesh and blood son stepping out of the past, felt like the ground cracking open beneath all of us. Jonathan's eyes flicked around the room, lingering on the reporters, the congregation, and finally on me. He studied me like he was trying to decide who I was, what I was doing here, why I mattered at all. "And you," he said softly. And blinked. "Me. You're his wife, right?" His gaze was piercing. "The one he married yesterday. The one who's already filing for divorce." Gasps rippled through the crowd again. I felt my face flush, heat crawling up my neck. Emily gripped my arm tighter, whispering, "Grandma, you don't owe them anything." But I lifted my chin. My voice shook, but I made it steady. "Yes, I married him yesterday. And yes, I filed for divorce this morning." The room buzzed louder, people muttering, some shaking their heads, some nodding as though it made sense now. Jonathan looked back at Daniel. "You kept 2 secrets. Me and yourself. Why? Were you ashamed of me? Of what you are? Or was it easier to let everyone think I was dead?" The words cut through the room like a blade. Daniel finally raised his head. His face was wet with tears, his eyes hollow with grief. "I didn't know, Jonathan. I swear to God I didn't know. They told us you were gone. They buried us in that lie. I carried the weight of your death for 50 years. I buried you in my prayers every night. I thought I failed you, that I failed Ruth, that I failed myself. I never knew you were alive. Not until tonight." Jonathan's expression cracked just slightly, anger softening into something else. But then he clenched his jaw again, his fists tightening. "Do you know what it's like to grow up never knowing who you are? To feel like a puzzle with half the pieces missing? To look in the mirror and see a face that doesn't belong anywhere? You don't get to cry, old man. Not after what I lost." Daniel swayed again, clutching the podium. His voice was thin now, trembling. You're right. I don't get to cry. I don't get forgiveness. But if you'll just let me, I want to know you. Please, son. Please. The room was so silent you could hear the hum of the old fluorescent lights. Jonathan stared at him for a long, long moment. Then he turned to Ruth, his expression softening. You knew, he said. You knew I was out there. Ruth shook her head, tears falling freely. No, Jonathan. I only learned recently. I thought you were gone too. They told me you were gone. She reached out a trembling hand toward him. I never stopped mourning you. Jonathan's eyes darted between her hand and Daniel's broken figure at the podium. His chest heaved as though he were fighting an ocean inside him. Finally, he turned back to the crowd. I didn't come here to make a scene. I came here for answers. But I see now. He paused, his eyes flashing with something that looked like fire. Answers won't be enough. I want accountability. Murmurs. Pastor Rick stepped forward, his brow furrowed. Jonathan, what do you mean by that? Jonathan's lips curved into something between a smile and a grimace. I've already contacted a lawyer. If the hospital stole 50 years from me, if they buried me in lies, then they're going to pay. And if anyone here helped cover it up, if anyone knew and stayed silent, they're going to pay too. The hall filled with uneasy murmurs again. Some nodded in support. Others looked fearful. A few looked at Daniel with pity. Daniel's legs buckled. He collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. God have mercy, he whispered. And as the congregation stirred, as Ruth sobbed, as Jonathan stood like a storm in the center of the room, I realized this wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It wasn't just about a secret marriage gone wrong. This was about to explode into something bigger. Lawsuits, scandals, public shame. And I was tied to it whether I liked it or not. Emily leaned in close, her voice a trembling whisper. Grandma, we should go. This isn't safe. People are angry. Some of them are looking at you like you're part of it. I looked around. She was right. Eyes burned into me. Some curious, some accusing, some outright hostile. I wasn't Daniel's accomplice, but in their eyes I was his wife, his cover, his shield. I grabbed my coat tighter around me, suddenly cold despite the crowded room. But before I could move, Jonathan's voice boomed again. And you, Margaret, right? You have a choice too. You can walk away from him or you can stand by him. But know this, whichever side you choose, you're going to live with the consequences. The room erupted again. People shouting, arguing, demanding clarity. And me. My heart pounded like it wanted to tear out of my chest. 'Cause Jonathan was right. Had to choose. And whichever way I turned, someone was going to burn. I took a shaky step forward, my voice trembling but clear enough for the room to hear. My choice, I said slowly, will come tomorrow. The crowd stilled, stunned. And with that I turned, Emily gripping my arm, and we walked out into the freezing night, leaving behind a room thick with secrets, rage, and the storm that had only just begun. But as I stepped into the cold air, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Text message. Unknown number. Tomorrow, you'll regret the side you choose. My heart sank. This wasn't just about love or betrayal anymore. Someone out there wanted me silenced. The text haunted me all night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the pale glow of the moon spilling through the curtains. Emily had insisted on staying over, curled up on the pull-out couch with Penny the cat nestled at her feet. Every creak of the house made me sit up, my heart pounding against my ribs. 84 years old, and still I was afraid like a child again. Afraid of shadows, of whispers, of the unknown lurking just outside the window. But this time, the fear wasn't of the dark. It was of people. Tomorrow, you'll regret the side you choose. The words replayed in my mind, cold as ice water. Who had sent it? Someone from church. One of the reporters. Jonathan himself. The possibilities swirled like smoke, choking me. I tried to pray, but even the words felt hollow. Instead, I clutched the cross necklace I'd worn since my husband's funeral and whispered, Lord, give me wisdom, because I don't know what to do. When dawn finally broke, gray and weak, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Emily stirred awake around 7, her hair tangled, her eyes swollen with sleep. Grandma, she yawned, padding into the kitchen. You look like you haven't slept a wink. I haven't, I admitted. She frowned, noticing the phone beside me. Did he text again? I shook my head. Just that one. Emily sat across from me, her hands wrapping around mine. You can't go back there, Grandma. Not today. Let them fight it out. Jonathan, Ruth, Daniel, they've been tangled in this web for 50 years. You don't owe them your peace. She was right. And yet something inside me twisted. Walking away sounded simple, but it wasn't. I was tied to Daniel now. If not by love, then by vows, by scandal, by the public eye. If I left, people would say I abandoned him. If I stayed, they'd say I enabled him. Either way, my name would be dragged through the mud. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. My chest tightened, but it wasn't another threat. It was Pastor Rick. Margaret, please come to the church at noon. Daniel asked for you. Says it's urgent. I showed Emily. Her jaw tightened. Don't go, she said. But deep down I knew I would. Not for Daniel's sake, but for mine. I needed closure. Answers. Something solid in this storm of half-truths. By noon, I was back at St. Mark's Fellowship Hall. The parking lot was half full, cars dusted with frost. Inside, the air was heavy with the smell of burnt coffee and damp coats. Pastor Rick met me at the door, his face drawn with worry. He's in my office, he said softly. He hasn't slept. He looks broken. I followed him down the hall, my steps echoing on the linoleum. When we entered the office, Daniel sat hunched over a Bible, his hands trembling as he traced the thin pages. He looked up, and his eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with sorrow. Margaret, he breathed, standing slowly. Thank you for coming. I stayed near the doorway, my arms crossed. What's so urgent? He swallowed hard. Jonathan, he's filing the lawsuit today. Against the hospital. Against everyone involved. And he wants me to testify. But Margaret, there's more. There's something he doesn't know. My heart skipped. What do you mean? Daniel looked down, his voice barely a whisper. Ruth wasn't the only one. The room seemed to tilt. The only one what? His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the desk. St. Joseph's didn't just steal one baby. They took more. I was part of it. Not willingly. But they used me. They studied me. They told me I was special, unique. They lied to me, Margaret. They said if I cooperated, they'd make me normal. But all the while they were taking children. Not just Jonathan. More. My breath caught in my throat. Are you saying, there are others? Daniel nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. Yes. And if Jonathan digs, if the lawyers find it, everything will come out. My whole life, every secret, every shame, splashed across the world. He looked at me desperately. That's why I need you. Please stand by me. Not as my wife, not even as my friend. Just as someone who knows what it's like to carry a truth too heavy to hold alone. I stared at him, my stomach churning. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part wanted to run. But another, strange, unwelcome part, wanted to reach out and comfort him. Because in his brokenness, I saw a reflection of my own. Before I could answer, the office door burst open. Emily stood there, her face pale, her phone clutched in her hand. Grandma, she gasped. You need to see this. She thrust the phone toward me. On the screen was a live video feed, streaming on social media. Jonathan, standing on the courthouse steps, microphones shoved in his face. Reporters swarmed like bees. My name is Jonathan Williams, he declared, his voice booming. I was stolen at birth. My parents were lied to. My life was stolen from me. And I won't stop until everyone responsible is held accountable, including my father, Daniel Harrington. The crowd roared. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel crumpled back into the chair, his body trembling. Pastor Rick muttered a prayer under his breath. Emily grabbed my arm. And then, in the middle of that live feed, Jonathan held up a photograph, one of the old hospital records Ruth had shown us. His eyes burned into the cameras. "This isn't just about me," he declared. "There are more. More children. More lies. More stolen lives. And I will uncover them all." The screen flickered as the crowd erupted again. And in that instant I knew. Daniel's secret was no longer a secret. The whole town, the whole state, maybe the whole country would know soon. I staggered back against the wall, my heart pounding. Because whatever side I chose, whatever path I took, there was no going back. And worse, if Jonathan was right, this wasn't just a family scandal. This was a war. By morning, the story wasn't just in Maine anymore. It was everywhere. The television in my living room flickered with breaking news segments, anchors sitting stiffly behind desks with solemn faces. The headlines screamed across the screen in bold red letters. "Stolen at birth. Son reunites with father after 50 years. Hospital scandal resurfaces. Intersex man at center of case. Church wedding turns to national shame." Each time my name was mentioned, Margaret Evans, the bride who filed for divorce less than 24 hours later, I felt a piece of my soul crack. My phone buzzed constantly, strangers demanding interviews, neighbors whispering outside my door, even relatives I hadn't spoken to in years calling to ask if the rumors were true. Emily begged me to turn the TV off, but I couldn't. It was like staring at a house fire. I couldn't look away even as it burned me. By the third segment, my tea had gone cold in my hands. "This is out of control," I whispered. Emily sat beside me, her face pale. "Grandma, you don't have to be a part of this. You don't owe Daniel anything." But deep down I knew it wasn't that simple anymore. Daniel's life was a mess, yes, but somehow mine had been pulled into it like fabric snagged on a nail. And whether I liked it or not, people were already painting me as part of the story. A knock rattled the front door, sharp and impatient. Emily stiffened. "Don't answer that." But I did. Standing on my porch was a man in a dark coat. His collar turned up against the cold. He had a briefcase in one hand and a business card in the other. His eyes were sharp, assessing. "Mrs. Evans?" he asked. "Yes." He handed me the card. "My name is Peter Lowell. I'm an attorney representing several families who also suspect they were victims of the St. Joseph scandal. We need to speak with you." I hesitated, my stomach twisting. "I don't know anything." "On the contrary," he interrupted smoothly. "You know Daniel Harrington. You were his wife briefly. And right now, you're one of the only people who can confirm his state of mind. His history, his words." "I filed for divorce," I snapped. "I barely know him." The lawyer tilted his head. "All the more reason to talk. If you're truly not involved, Mrs. Evans, you should clear your name now. Otherwise," his eyes narrowed, "the court of public opinion will make its own decision." Emily slammed the door shut in his face. "Don't listen to him, Grandma. He just wants to use you." But his words lingered. "Clear your name. Could I even do that?" By noon, Pastor Rick called again. His voice was tight. "Margaret, Daniel's not doing well. He hasn't eaten. He hasn't slept. He keeps saying he's going to make it right, but I don't think he means in the way we hope. Would you come see him?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to slam the phone down and be done with all of it. But something in Rick's voice, fear, desperation, made me pause. "Fine," I said. But only for a few minutes. When I arrived at the parsonage, Daniel was sitting by the window, staring out at the snow-dusted street. He looked older than I'd ever seen him. Frail, hollow, like life itself had drained out of him overnight. "Margaret," he whispered when he saw me. I kept my coat on, my arms crossed. "You wanted to see me." He nodded slowly. "I don't expect forgiveness. Not from you, not from Jonathan, not from anyone. But I can't let this destroy more lives than it already has. The hospital, the church. They'll bury it all again if someone doesn't stand up. He swallowed hard, his hands trembling. That someone has to be me. He frowned. What are you saying? I'm going public, he said, his voice steadier now. A press conference. Today. I'll tell everything about the hospital, about Ruth, about Jonathan, about what they did to me. Even about my body. No more lies. No more shame. If they crucify me, so be it. My knees went weak. Daniel, do you realize what you're doing? They'll tear you apart. The media, the public. They'll eat you alive. He met my eyes for the first time, and there was a strange peace in his expression. I've been hiding my whole life. If the last thing I do is speak the truth, then maybe, just maybe, Jonathan will know I didn't abandon him. That I didn't choose silence. That I tried. Pastor Rick hovered nearby, his hands wringing. Margaret, I've tried talking him out of it. But I think he's set his mind. I felt my throat tighten. For all his secrets, all his cowardice, all his failures, Daniel was about to do the bravest thing I'd ever seen him do. But then my phone buzzed again. Another text. This time a photo. It was my house. My front door. And across it, in dripping red spray paint, were the words, "Traitor." My hand shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. "Oh my God," I whispered. Emily's voice echoed in my head. "Grandma, this isn't safe." I looked at Daniel, at Pastor Rick, at the storm gathering outside those church walls. And I knew the choice I made now, whether to stand beside Daniel or walk away for good, would decide not just my future, but maybe even my safety. But before I could speak, before I could decide, a crash echoed outside. Shattering glass, followed by shouting voices. Pastor Rick ran to the window. His face went pale. "They're here." "Who?" asked, my heart racing. He turned slowly, his voice low and grim. "Protesters." And as the chants grew louder, as fists pounded against the church doors, as my phone buzzed with more threats, I realized. This wasn't just Daniel's battle anymore. I had been dragged into the war. The pounding on the church doors rattled through the hall like thunder. Voices rose in an angry chorus outside, fists slamming against wood, glass shattering somewhere in the distance. My chest clenched so tight I thought my heart would burst. Pastor Rick bolted the office door and turned to us, his face pale. "They're not just protesters," he said. "Some of them are from out of town. People saw the news, they came looking for blood." Daniel sat slumped in his chair, staring at the floor, his hands limp in his lap. He looked resigned, as though this was the fate he'd expected all along. But I wasn't resigned. I was terrified. "Rick," I whispered, clutching the back of a chair. "What do they want?" "They want a spectacle," he said grimly. "They want Daniel paraded out like a villain." The pounding grew louder, the chant clearer now. "Liar! Fraud! Justice! Justice!" Emily pressed herself against me, her hand gripping my sleeve. "Grandma, we need to get out of here." But before Pastor Rick could respond, his phone buzzed. He answered quickly, murmured something, then looked at us. "It's Jonathan," he said. "He's outside. With the reporters. He says he wants to speak to Daniel now. In front of everyone." My stomach dropped. "No, that's a trap. He's angry, and the crowd will eat it up. Daniel won't survive that." Daniel lifted his head slowly. His eyes were swollen red but steady. "It's time," he said softly. "If my son wants answers, I'll give them. If the world wants my truth, they can have it. I won't hide anymore." "No," I snapped louder than I meant to. My voice shook the air. "You think you're being brave, but you're walking into a firing squad. They don't want truth, Daniel. They want blood." His lips curved into a faint, broken smile. "Maybe blood is all I have left to give." The crowd outside roared again. The office walls seemed to shake with the noise. Pastor Rick gritted his teeth. "If you go out there, you don't go alone. Margaret, you should." "No," Emily cut in. She's not going out there. Grandma, you're not. You'll get torn apart too. But I knew something Emily didn't. My name was already in the headlines, already linked to Daniel. Whether I liked it or not, the crowd would see me as part of this. Hiding wouldn't save me. I closed my eyes, breathing through the storm in my chest. When I opened them, I looked straight at Daniel. If you're walking out there, then so am I said. His face crumpled with something like gratitude and guilt. Minutes later, Pastor Rick unbolted the church doors. The roar of the crowd surged in like a wave. Flashbulbs burst, reporters shoved forward. Microphones extended like weapons. Daniel, did you lie about your son? Who is the woman with you? Margaret, are you still his wife or not? I stood beside Daniel, my knees trembling but my back straight. Emily hovered behind me, her face pale. Pastor Rick raised his hands, trying to calm the crowd, but the noise only swelled. Then Jonathan stepped forward. He looked taller under the flood of camera lights, his presence commanding, his eyes blazing. In his hand was a stack of papers, more hospital records, no doubt. He walked straight toward Daniel until they stood face to face, father and son, 50 years of silence hanging between them. The crowd hushed, as if the air itself leaned in to listen. Jonathan's voice was low, but it carried. You abandoned me. Daniel shook his head weakly. No, they told me you were gone. You believed them, Jonathan shot back. You never fought. You never asked questions. You buried me, and then you built a life like I never existed. His voice cracked, raw with fury. You don't get to cry your way out of this. Daniel's body trembled. I carried your ghost for 50 years. Every day, every night. I prayed for you. I hated myself for losing you. I thought I was cursed. I thought I didn't deserve life. If I could trade places with you. Jonathan cut him off, his voice booming. But you didn't. You lived. You hid. And now you want pity. The crowd murmured, restless, caught between sympathy and rage. And then Jonathan turned his gaze on me. His eyes locked with mine, sharp as knives. And you? Why are you here? Are you his shield? His alibi? His poor, naive wife who only just learned the truth. The cameras swung toward me. My throat closed. 1,000 faces stared, waiting for my answer. I could feel Emily's grip on my sleeve, begging me silently to stay quiet. I could feel Daniel's presence beside me, trembling, waiting. I swallowed hard, then raised my chin. My voice was steady, though my hands shook. I am not his shield, I said. I am not his alibi. I am a woman who was lied to, just like you were. But I will tell you this. Secrets rot us. Lies bury us. And if we want the truth, we can't tear each other apart. We have to face the real villains. The ones who wrote those lies. The ones who made money from stolen lives. The crowd stirred, divided. Some shouted in agreement. Others hissed in anger. Reporters scribbled furiously. Jonathan's jaw clenched. He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. So what side are you on, Margaret? His or mine? The air froze. The crowd leaned forward. Cameras flashed. And in that moment I realized there was no middle ground anymore. Had to choose. But before I could open my mouth, a loud bang echoed through the air. The crowd screamed, scattering. Reporters ducked. Pastor Rick shouted for calm. Another bang. Glass shattering from the side window of the church. And then a voice, deep and furious, rang out from the chaos. No more lies. They all pay tonight. My heart stopped cold. Because whoever was out there wasn't just angry. They were armed. The second bang wasn't a reporter's camera. It was the unmistakable crack of a gunshot. Screams tore through the crowd. People shoved past one another, tripping over pews, pushing against the church doors to escape. The air filled with panic. The sharp smell of gunpowder mingled with fear and sweat. Emily clutched my arm so tight I felt her nails dig through my coat. Grandma! We need to go. But I couldn't move. My legs rooted to the floor, my eyes fixed on the man forcing his way through the side door. He wore a black jacket, his face shadowed by a hood, but his eyes were wild, burning with a rage I had seen in headlines in history but never so close. He raised the gun high. The crowd froze again, screams cutting off into gasps. "Enough!" the man roared. His voice was raw, jagged. "You've lied long enough. This isn't justice. It's a circus. And now everybody pays." He swung the gun toward Daniel. "No!" I screamed, stepping forward without thinking. "Stop!" The man's eyes flicked to me, narrowing. "You," he spat. "The wife. The one protecting him." He took a step closer, the barrel steady. "You're as guilty as he is." Daniel stumbled in front of me, his arms outstretched. "Leave her out of this." His voice cracked. "I'm the one you want. I'm the liar." The crowd shifted uneasily, whispers buzzing like hornets. Cameras still rolled, reporters crouched low but unwilling to miss a second. Jonathan pushed forward now, his face set, his jaw clenched. "Put the gun down," he said, his voice steady in a way that startled me. "If you want justice, this isn't the way. Don't make me lose him twice in one lifetime." For a moment the man wavered. His hands shook, his breathing ragged. But then his eyes blazed again. "You don't understand. They covered up everything. St. Joseph's, the church, the state. I was one of them too. They took my sister. They buried her in lies." The words sent a ripple through the crowd. Another victim. Another ghost clawing its way into the light. The man's hands shook harder. The gun wavered between Daniel, Jonathan, and me. And then, before anyone could move, he fired. The sound shattered the air, deafening. I braced for pain, for the tearing of flesh, for the end. But the bullet struck the podium instead, splintering wood into shards. Gasps erupted. Children cried. Pastor Rick moved like lightning, tackling the man from behind. The gun clattered across the floor. Men from the congregation surged forward, pinning him down. The struggle was brief but violent. Kicks, shouts, the sound of fists against wood. And then silence again, broken only by the ragged sobs of those who'd barely escaped death. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. I stood trembling, my hands over my chest, my body shaking like a leaf in the wind. Emily held me, her tears hot against my shoulder. Daniel collapsed into a pew, his face buried in his hands. "God forgive us," he whispered over and over. "God forgive us." Jonathan stood frozen, staring at the man being dragged outside by furious hands. His lips trembled, his fists clenched at his sides. "This is what secrets do," he said, his voice hoarse. "They make people into monsters." The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights flashing through the stained glass windows. Police stormed the hall, shouting orders, pulling the gunman away. And then, just as calm began to return, just as breaths began to steady, one of the officers approached me. "Mrs. Evans?" he asked, his expression grim. I nodded, still trembling. He held out a folded piece of paper. This was in the gunman's pocket. "Addressed to you." My blood ran cold as I took it. The handwriting was messy, scrawled in anger. "You can't choose sides anymore. You're already on the list." My knees nearly gave out. Emily caught me before I fell. Because in that moment I understood. This wasn't over. The hospital scandal had woken ghosts too many people wanted buried. And now I wasn't just a witness. I was a target. And the war Daniel spoke of, it had only just begun. The paper shook in my hand long after the officer walked away. Emily kept her arm around me, but my knees still felt weak, like they'd forgotten how to hold me. The crowd inside the church whispered in low, frantic tones, their eyes darting between me and the stained glass where the red and blue lights painted streaks of judgment across the walls. On the paper, the words bled together in angry ink. "You can't choose sides anymore. You're already on the list." I folded it quickly, hiding it from Emily's eyes, but she'd already seen enough. "Grandma," she whispered fiercely, "we have to leave. Tonight. Right now. These people are dangerous." Pastor Rick came over, rubbing the side of his jaw where he'd tackled the gunman. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried fear. "You can stay at the parsonage tonight if you need protection. The police will be circling the area." But I shook my head. "No. If they want me, they'll find me here too. I can't keep running from shadows. I need to understand what's happening before I decide anything." Daniel sat hunched in the pew, his shoulders trembling as though the weight of every sin pressed down at once. He hadn't spoken since the gun was taken away. Jonathan stood a few feet from him, silent too, but his silence was sharp, like a blade waiting for the right moment. Finally, Jonathan broke it. "This isn't about you anymore, Dad," he said, his voice low but carrying. "People like that man, people who lost their families to lies, are coming forward. And they're angry. If you don't step up, this will consume everyone, not just us." Daniel lifted his head slowly, his face hollow. "I already said I'll tell the truth." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "Words aren't enough. I got a lawyer. We're filing against St. Joseph's. And I want you, both of you." His gaze flicked to me. "To stand with me. Testify. Tell them what you know." The words hit me like cold water. "Me. Jonathan, I barely know any of this. I was married for one day before the rug was pulled out from under me. Why would they need me?" "Because you were deceived too," Jonathan said firmly. "Because people will believe a woman like you, an innocent caught in the storm. You're the only one here who doesn't look like you're trying to protect yourself. That makes you powerful. That makes you dangerous to them." Dangerous. The word curled in my chest like fire. Emily shook her head violently. "No way. Grandma isn't going to stand in front of reporters and lawyers. She's already being threatened." Jonathan stepped closer, his face tight, his jaw set. "And that's exactly why she can't stay silent. Silence is what lets these people win. Silence is what kept me buried for 50 years. Don't let it bury anyone else." His words pressed into me, heavy, undeniable. But so did the memory of the spray-painted word on my front door. Traitor. So did the letter in my hand, warning I was already on some list. Pastor Rick cleared his throat. "Maybe this isn't a decision to make tonight. Everyone needs rest." But Jonathan wasn't done. He pulled something from his pocket, an old photograph. He held it out to me. "This was me at 8, he said. "Adoptive family. Good people. But I always knew something was missing. Look at my face. Tell me you don't see him in me." I took the photo reluctantly. And God help me, I did. The same sharp nose. The same piercing eyes. A boy carrying secrets he didn't understand. My throat tightened. Jonathan's voice softened now. "Margaret, I don't hate you. I don't blame you for marrying him. But you can't pretend you're not part of this anymore. We're here. You've seen too much. And whether you stand with us or walk away, people will notice. People will talk." The room spun. My hands trembled as I gave the photo back. Emily squeezed me tighter, her whisper hot and urgent. "Grandma, don't do it. Don't get pulled deeper. Let them fight this themselves." But Jonathan's eyes stayed locked on mine. He wasn't asking anymore. He was warning. "Think about it," he said. "By tomorrow, I'll need your answer." He left then, the doors slamming behind him, leaving a silence that echoed like a hollow drum. Daniel finally spoke, his voice hoarse, broken. "Margaret, if you testify, you'll destroy me." And I realized with a cold shiver that no matter what choice I made, stand with Jonathan or stand with Daniel, I would destroy someone. That night, when Emily finally dozed on the couch, I sat alone at the table, staring at the folded note from the gunman. My house creaked around me, the quiet heavy and thick. I thought of Jonathan's eyes, burning with anger and loss. I thought of Daniel's tears, his trembling hands. And then my phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number. This time it wasn't words. It was a picture. My front porch. And on it my cat, Penny. A red circle drawn around her. My breath caught. My hands went cold. 'Cause now I knew. The threats weren't just against me. They were against everything I loved. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. All night, I sat at my kitchen table with the note and the picture of Penny circled in red. My heart thudded so hard it rattled in my ribs. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every gust of wind outside sounded like footsteps. At 84 years old, I thought I'd faced enough storms. Widowhood, illness, loneliness. But this storm was different. This storm wanted to take me down with it. By dawn, the frost on the windows glowed gold, but I felt no warmth. Emily stirred on the couch, her hair tangled, her face lined with worry. "Grandma," she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "You didn't sleep." "No," I whispered. My voice was sandpaper. She yawned, then sat up. Her eyes widened when she saw the paper and the photo still in front of me. "Grandma, please. Don't let them scare you. We can go to the police." I shook my head. "The police can't protect us from whispers, Emily. They can't protect us from the truth coming out." Before she could argue, my phone buzzed. Another text. "Decision time. Noon. Courthouse steps." I stared at it until my eyes blurred. Noon. That was less than 5 hours away. By 8 o'clock, reporters were already camped outside my street. I peeked through the curtains to see vans with satellite dishes, microphones in mittened hands, cameras pointed toward my house. Neighbors lingered, whispering to each other, pointing at me like I was already guilty of something. Emily's voice was frantic. "Don't go, Grandma. Let them eat each other alive. You don't need to choose." But deep down I knew she was wrong. I did have to choose. Not because I wanted to, but because silence was its own choice. Silence would mean letting other people write my story, twist it until I was just a footnote. At 11:30, Pastor Rick arrived. He looked tired, older than yesterday, the weight of it all dragging his shoulders down. "Margaret," he said gently, "they're waiting. Jonathan's already there. Daniel too. The media, it's everywhere." Emily grabbed my hand. "Don't do this." I squeezed her fingers. "Baby, sometimes life doesn't ask what we want. Sometimes it just asks if we're willing to stand." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then at least let me come with you." By noon, the courthouse steps were a battlefield. Reporters crammed shoulder to shoulder, microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing. Protesters shouted on both sides, some with signs calling for justice, others demanding silence. Police stood in tight lines, their hands hovering near their belts. Jonathan was already at the podium, his lawyer beside him. He looked fierce, fire in his eyes, holding a folder thick with papers. Daniel stood a few feet back, pale, trembling, his blazer wrinkled, his hands shaking as if he might collapse. When I stepped forward, the crowd surged. Shouts filled the air. "There she is. Margaret, are you standing with him or his son? Are you testifying?" Flashes blinded me. Emily clung to my arm, shielding me as best she could. Pastor Rick cleared a path, his hand firm at my back. Jonathan's eyes locked on mine. He nodded once. "Well," he asked, his voice amplified by the microphones, "will you stand with the victims, or will you shield the man who kept his silence?" The crowd roared. All eyes turned to me. My throat felt dry as bone. My chest ached. I could hear Emily's whisper, "Don't do it." I could feel Daniel's eyes begging, "Please don't destroy me." And in that moment I saw them both. Jonathan, the stolen son, carrying 50 years of anger and grief. Daniel, the broken man, twisted by shame and fear, but still human, still crying out for mercy. I stepped up to the microphone. My voice trembled at first, then steadied. "My name is Margaret Evans," I said. "I married Daniel Harrington yesterday. And yes, I filed for divorce the very next morning. 'Cause I was lied to. But I am not here today as a wife or an ex-wife. I am here as a woman who believes secrets are poison. They kill families. They kill faith. They kill hope. The crowd hushed. I lifted the folded note from my pocket, holding it high. This was left for me. Threat. A warning to stay silent. But I will not stay silent. I let the words hang in the air, heavy and sharp. Jonathan's eyes burned with gratitude. Daniel closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging. I will testify, I said firmly. Not against one man. Against a system that buried children in lies. Against the hospital that stole lives. Against anyone who profited from pain. That's my choice. That's my stand. The crowd erupted, cheers, boos, shouts. Reporters shoved forward, questions flying. Jonathan gripped the podium, his eyes glistening. Daniel sank to his knees, his face in his hands. Emily clung to me, tears streaming down her face. "Grandma," she whispered. But before I could turn to her, before I could breathe relief, a hand shoved through the crowd. A voice hissed in my ear. "You just signed your death warrant." I spun, but the figure melted back into the mob, swallowed by the chaos. My heart pounded. Fear clawed up my throat. But above it all I felt something stronger. Had spoken. Had chosen. And no matter what came next, threats, danger, even death, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. My silence would never be for sale. Backhand index pointing right. If you were in Margaret's shoes, would you have stood with Jonathan and the victims? Or walked away to protect yourself? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to see how far this storm will go, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because the next chapter will shake you even more.